So you've mastered your first 3 planets and you're ready for Aquilo. You pack your usual building supplies and your solar panels and you plan to build up rockets and science like before. But then you realize Aquilo has no basic resources or sunlight, just ice, more ice, and a gigantic ammonia ocean. But don't worry, this guide will show you how to turn ice and ammonia into cryogenic science and provide you a blueprint to escape this frozen wasteland. This guide assumes you have a spaceship capable of making round trips between Aquilo and other planets. Unlike previous planets, you can't build up from scratch here. Unlike the previous planets, you can't actually build up from scratch here. So if you need a suitable ship, check out my Aquilo spaceship guide on my channel. When you land on Aquilo, you'll notice there's no stone, copper, or iron. Instead, disassembling these rocks will yield ice, ice platform, and lithium. If you explore a little bit further, you will find crude oil, lithium brine, and fluorine. To start with, you're going to need power. But you'll notice that solar panels are completely useless here with a 99% solar output reduction. This many solar panels is only generating a tiny 21 kilowatts of power. You'll also find that your construction robots are extremely slow at recharging. And that's due to Aquilo's 5 times robot energy usage. To add to that, you'll need to concrete over various types of ice before you can build on them. The good news is that cryogenic science is only 3 steps away after planet discovery Aquilo. You just need to mine a big lithium ice formation to unlock lithium processing, craft a lithium plate to unlock the cryogenic plant, and craft a cryogenic plant to unlock cryogenic science packs. Mining a big lithium formation to unlock lithium smelting is simple, but smelting it presents a challenge. Aquilo's extreme cold causes buildings to freeze, unless they are touching a heat source, with the exception of electric poles, solar panels, and accumulators. Additionally, you're going to need power or a burnable fuel to run some sort of smelter. For some temporary heat, you have 2 options. You can bring a nuclear reactor and fuel it with uranium fuel cells, or you can build a heating tower and fuel it with some rocket fuel that you bring. I prefer the nuclear reactor option as you can just put it down and forget about it, whereas the heating tower burns through the rocket fuel quite fast. But either way, once your heat pipes reach around 30 degrees, your buildings will defrost and they will begin to work. For power, we should probably just leverage the heat that we're already producing to create power by using turbines. Start by connecting your heat source to some heat exchangers to boil water. Connect your turbines to the system to turn that steam into power. Make sure everything is touching a heat pipe to stop it from freezing. You will be needing a chem lab to melt the ice to provide water to the system, and this should provide some steady power to get you going. Now, getting started is a little bit tricky. You might want to put down a box with some ice in it and use an inserter to feed that into your chem lab, and you'll need some initial power to get that going. So you can hook all that up with power poles and then just try to use as many solar panels as you can to get this initial system jump started. Just let it run on low power mode to let it slowly fill up the pipes and the heat exchangers with water. Once your system reaches 500 degrees, your heat exchangers and steam turbines will kick in and you will have a steady source of power around 23 megawatts with 4 turbines. Now, you can't keep manually feeding in ice forever, so grab yourself an electric furnace, feed in some lithium ore, and produce your first lithium plates. This will unlock the cryogenic plant. To build it, you'll need blue circuits, superconductors, and refined concrete, which you'll have to ship in externally. Just build 2 to get you started, but just know our final blueprint will need 8. Once your first cryo plant is set up, you'll be able to automate power and heat on Aquilo. The cryo plant has a recipe, ammoniacal solution separation, which turns ammoniacal solution into ice and ammonia. With the solution being pumped from an offshore pump, you can pipe it all the way back to your cryo lab and make ice and feed that ice into your chem lab to automate the water production. Next, you'll want to set up a second plant to create solid fuel from ammonia. This recipe takes 50 ammonia and 20 crude oil and produces 1 solid fuel. It's best to build this whole setup close to your crude oil supply because, as you can see, Pumping anything anywhere on Aquilo presents a big heating challenge. But now you should have a steady fuel source too. You can't just be running long heat pipes everywhere, because the longer your heat pipe is, the harder it is for your heat source to maintain its temperature. Instead, you can try my tileable Aquilo heat island blueprint, which is a little thing that you can tile and link up to your fuel source, and you can use it to connect and spread heat towers around your build, and also use it to get to distant places. All you need to do is tile them down and ensure that the underground is connected. And as long as you connect it to where the main fuel source is coming out, all you have to do is prime it with a little bit of any fuel. It will start heating itself up. And once it hits 30 degrees, it'll defrost and just grab the fuel from the fuel line. It's got a little temperature check to make sure it keeps it at around 100 degrees so it doesn't overconsume the initial fuel to reach temp. Then it'll continue to pass the fuel along to the next island. Just repeat and add a little bit of fuel to the next island. Then it'll defrost and again keep itself heated up, and so on and so forth. You can just use these heat towers anywhere to reach distant islands to get various resources in case you need to like go over here, for example, to get your fluorine. Or you can just spread them around the base to make heat piping a little bit easier. If you need to turn them, you can obviously just turn this belt around and then just connect to your next island accordingly. Anyway, let's quickly go over the rest of the processes to create the science. Now, working backwards, your science is going to need 3 components. Ice, which we've covered, lithium plate, which we've seen but not automated yet, and cold fluoroketone. Let's start with automating the lithium production. To make lithium ore, you need another cryo lab. It requires 1 holmium plate, 50 lithium brine, and 50 ammonia. The ammonia we've already covered. The lithium brine I mentioned earlier, you can find them by pumping them out of nodes around the map. You'll probably have to use my heating island towers to get to them. The holmium plate, you're definitely going to have to import from Fulgora, so make sure you build your cargo landing pad somewhere. Once you have your lithium ore, you can just feed it into your smelters and produce lithium plate. Next is the fluoroketone. Cold fluoroketone is made by cooling hot fluoroketone in a cryo lab. To make hot fluoroketone, you're going to need 1 solid fuel, 1 lithium, 50 fluorine, and 50 ammonia. You've seen solid fuel, ammonia, and lithium. We've already covered those. Fluorine, you're going to have to find nodes around your map and pump it into your base. Again, using those heating tower islands if you need to get to a far away source. But once you've got all those ingredients fed in, you'll be able to produce the hot fluoroketone, which will then be fed into the cryo lab to cool it down to cold fluoroketone. And then you can feed all 3 of those ingredients into a cryo lab and produce your cryogenic science pack using 3 ice, 1 lithium plate, and 6 fluoroketone cold. Now, it also produces hot fluoroketone, so you will have to pipe that back into your cold fluoroketone maker to avoid the system from clogging. But now that you understand the process, let's look at an example build that will produce a decent amount of cryoscience. I'll admit it's not the prettiest blueprint, but it'll get you the science and it's not too difficult to set up. Let's walk through the details so you understand how it works. Starting up north with power and heat. This is an expanded version of what I showed before. I'm using 6 heating towers, 3 up here and 3 down here. That'll heat these 24 heat exchangers, which will provide enough steam for these turbines. That's going to generate you around 230 megawatts of power, and when this system is running, it runs at around 100 megawatts on average. But it's always better to have extra power, since expanding anything on Aquilo later is going to be a little bit challenging. But if you don't want to set this up for 200 megawatts of power, you can just halve this setup by shaving off some steam turbines on either side and reducing the amount of heat exchangers in this area. It'll make everything easier to maintain the heat. Now, to provide the whopping 250 water that you need to supply these heat exchangers, we have these 2 fully beaconed ChemLabs melting ice. They provide just enough water to power this whole system, even if you were to use up all 230 megawatts, which you generally won't be doing. To provide the ice, we have this fully beaconed cryolab doing the ammoniacal solution separation to produce ice and ammonia for the rest of the system. Now, while we do need a lot of this ammonia production, we don't need 81 ice per second. So that's why I have 3 inserters pulling the ice out of the system, going into these recyclers just to delete the ice. Next to that, we have another cryolab that's doing the solid fuel from ammonia, takes in the ammonia and takes in the crude oil from some external source. And that produces the solid fuel that heats our entire system. The solid fuel gets transported out into these little heating tower islands, which I've spread around my entire build to make it easier to do the heat piping. You can, of course, then tack off any of this fuel belt to create those heating towers to reach the faraway places that you might need to pump in the lithium brine or the fluorine. Speaking of the lithium brine, once you do have that pumped in, we have another cryolab over here that takes the lithium brine and ammonia and some source of holmium plate. We assume this is connected to some cargo bay over here somewhere, to then supply your resources to make lithium ore. The lithium ore is then immediately being fed into this single smelter that's all beaconed up and moduled up to provide all the lithium plates needed for this entire system. Below that, we have these 4 cryolabs that make the science packs. So first we have the hot fluoroketone maker. It takes all those inputs and makes hot fluoroketone. That's being piped right next door to cool it down to cold fluoroketone, which is then being piped directly into these 2 cryo plants, which is making the final science pack. It also needs ice and a lithium plate. I did a bit of belt spaghetti to make this work. So the lithium plate is going up and around the side over here. It's meeting the ice, which is coming out around and down here to create this lithium ice belt, which is feeding the other 2 ingredients. This setup is going to produce you about 1.5 science per second, which is not a lot, but it'll definitely get you enough cryoscience to progress the game further. Now, at some point, you'll probably want to ship that cryoscience back to Nauvis. Now, since you can't make blue circuits or low density structures on Aquilo, you'll definitely need to ship those materials over. Alternatively, you could set up some space platform overhead to collect asteroids to turn into those materials, but honestly, I just think shipping it from Fulgora is just way easier. However, you can produce rocket fuel. So in a cryolab, you can do ammonia rocket fuel, which turns 3 solid fuel, 50 water, and 500 ammonia into 1 rocket fuel. You can see obviously the water is a little bit undersupplied, but this thing will produce way more rocket fuel than you ever need. Now, I'm in a creative mode, so I can run this at 64 speed to demonstrate that this system will just run continuously as long as you are continuing to consume all of the cryoscience, and it will indeed produce cryoscience if we check the last 10 minutes stats at about 1.5 per second or 90 per minute. Nothing in here theoretically should jam. It's all reasonably well balanced as long as everything is being consumed. The ammonia is continuously being turned into ice to power this whole system. All the temperature is being programmatically maintained at around 800 degrees Celsius. All these side heating towers are being programmatically maintained at about 100 degrees Celsius. If we look at our fuel belt, by slowing it down a bit, the fuel belt is pretty much completely saturated all the time, and we're still producing enough water to keep these systems fully saturated all the time. Now, with that being said, I have had my system stall out a couple of times due to my own mistakes or whatever. I might have accidentally deleted and disconnected a heating pipe, causing something to freeze and eventually running out of power. Another reason is if things get backed up and you're not fully consuming this ammonial solution, you could be underproducing the ice. And if you ever stop producing ice, you're going to eventually lose water and power. So to help kickstart this system, I've added a couple of additional features to it. You'll notice, first of all, there's a water tank here. So under normal operations, this tank is just going to store water and sit there with 25k water. You'll also notice I've added a couple of storage boxes that just have some rocket fuel in there and some burner inserters turned the wrong way. There's one here on this heating tower, one here on this heating tower, and one here on this heating tower. Now, let's just simulate what would happen if you had a power outage for whatever reason. You broke something in your system, or your ice has just stalled out because your ammonia wasn't being fully consumed, or your ammonia was being consumed too much and you weren't producing enough fuel, and now everything is frozen over. So I'm just going to cut my ice off over here. I'm going to flush my water, and then I'm going to let this system run for a while. You'll see eventually you'll run out of water, and eventually you're going to run out of power as well. Things are going to start freezing over, and you're never going to be able to get this system restarted. You're definitely going to have to come back to Aquilo to fix this, but you're not going to actually be able to fix this. There's no amount of solar panels you're going to be able to put down to remedy this system because it draws so much passive power. Even with enough solar panels, you're never going to be able to unfreeze everything, and you're never going to be able to get to these things running ever again, even if they were unfrozen, because this thing just draws way too much power for a 99% reduced solar farm to ever kickstart it again. Hence, we have these fallback systems. We don't need to get these ice makers working because we do have a tank with 25,000 water in it. It's temporarily frozen at the moment, and that's where these inserters come from. So just come back to your planet. Everything's frozen, don't worry about it. Just come back and flip these inserters around to get stuff temporarily unfrozen. Depending on how bad your situation is, you might need to, like if this is under 500 degrees or at 500 degrees, you might need to build a nuclear reactor over here and put in some nuclear fuel to kickstart the heat over here as well. But if you come back early enough and this is still at temp, you should just be able to flip these three things around and they will slowly defrost all the critical infrastructure. All right. Now that everything is defrosted, we can simply reverse the pump on this thing, and the water from this tank will now kick off the initial power, and all of a sudden we have 233 megawatts, which will give you hopefully just enough time to fix all the problems in your system. So for example, I cut off the ice here, so I'm going to fix whatever problem that caused the power outage in the first place, and now my ice is going again. These things are melting water again, which is great. This thing is now producing fuel again. I can leave my nuclear reactors and stuff all on if I need more heat, but if I don't, then everything should be fine again. You'll have to monitor the system, fix your problem, and wait for everything to resaturate, but eventually everything should work as normal. Don't forget to reflip this, reflip that, reflip all of these. Don't forget to load them up with fuel again, just in case it goes out a second time, so that you can use this to reboot the system again without going through a lot of headache. Now, as much as I'd like to say you can just slap this whole system down on Aquilo in one go, it's not actually that simple. Trying to build everything at once will basically make it impossible for solar panels to get this system started, as I showed you earlier. So instead, in this blueprint book I'm going to provide to you, the build is in 3 different stages: phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So let's start with how we might get this set up. We start with phase 1, and it's basically this top bit of the build with some additions. So just slap this down somewhere that makes sense. I would definitely recommend that you have enough concrete and enough ice landfill to tile over whatever you need to tile over to get this build done ahead of time. You don't want to be going out trying to farm all of the ice platforms that you need to get the build going halfway through the build. So make sure you tile out the entire area beforehand. So when you slap this down, it may look a little bit intimidating. You'll notice it's pretty much the top right of this section, but with a couple of extra nuclear reactors to help get you started, an extra box for the ice, and a couple of solar panels to jumpstart the system. So make sure that you have plenty of nuclear fuel, make sure you have plenty of ice, and make sure you have some rocket fuel as well for later. So with the nuclear fuel, you just want to chuck them into your 2 nuclear reactors. With all your ice, you just want to load it into this box. You pretty much need just like a full box of ice. It should be enough. And then you basically just need to wait. How long you might need to wait for? Quite a while. We need to wait for these nuclear reactors to get to about 700 degrees. When they start defrosting everything at about 100 degrees, these solar panels will kick in to get this one ice melter started on low power, and it will slowly start melting water and filling up this storage tank and filling up these heat exchangers. Now, once your temperature's reached over 500 degrees, you'll find that your power system is completely online now and you're producing maybe around 75 megawatts of power, definitely enough to get this ice melted. That ice will store all that water in here slowly, but I recommend you wait a little bit longer till your temperature reaches 750 degrees before you slap down part 2 of this blueprint. You can even wait till it's at 1000 degrees, but 700 is good enough to get you started. It doesn't really matter, but let's just slow the game down and see how we can put down part 2. So go to your blueprint book, grab part 2 and just lay it on top of part 1. Make sure you align it perfectly. It should fit and your bots will go and build all that, or you can go fill it in and build it, but eventually you'll have this all built. First, you'll notice your temperature immediately drops down and everything stops working again. That's fine. That's just because the blueprint needs time to stabilize the temperature after putting all this new infrastructure down. So if you let your game just run for long enough, the temperature will drop and drop and drop. Eventually it'll stabilize out and start going back up again. Now you want to wait till this temperature gets above 500 again. And while you're waiting, it's a good time to get this pump set up for ammonia and get the pump set up for crude oil. You might need to drop a couple of temporary nuclear reactors down to ensure that wherever you're getting your crude oil from is heated properly, and wherever you're getting your ammoniacal solution from is getting coming out properly as well. Now, when your thing hits around 500 degrees, it's time to get everything else unfrozen, and that's where the rocket fuel you brought earlier is going to come in handy. So grab your rocket fuel and just chuck it into these 3 heating towers and wait for everything to sort of defrost. And when this thing hits 500 degrees, we can see that everything will start sort of working again. Your power towers should now turn on and you should be producing around 150 megawatts of power. Assuming you have the thing inputted in here, you should be producing a little bit of ice, but it's still relying on the ice in this box to keep everything going. So if you have more ice, just chuck it in there for now. It's not really necessary. This will slowly provide the ice. And we can see the fuel is also coming out as long as you've got your crude oil pumped in there. And with that all set up, it is now time to slap down part 3 of the blueprint, and then everything should just start going again. So I'm going to grab part 3 of my blueprint and we're going to build it in there. So assuming your bots have built all of that slowly, the beacons should come first. You can like manually build them in. And as soon as you've built those beacons in, make sure you put your prod modules back into your ice makers. And we can see that the ammonia thing is now being completely run and we're getting all the ice that we need to feed this system. The system is now bringing all the water we need to feed this system, and everything should be running smoothly. On the back end of this, you will need to add a little bit of rocket fuel to get this side started as well. But once that gets started and that gets defrosted, you will have to hook in obviously your fluorine source from wherever you're getting fluorine from. You'll have to hook in your lithium brine source from wherever that's coming from. And once all of that is hooked in and everything is defrosted, your system should eventually just start working. Now I'm in creator mode, everything in here built instantly. Obviously you will be using bots to build everything and it might take a lot longer. And obviously I had it on 64 speed, so it looked quick, but don't get me wrong, this system does take a while to build and wait for the temperature to go up high enough to get everything kick-started. But once it does get kick-started, it will go on forever. Once that is all, when you're happy with everything, you can basically delete the extra infrastructure like these 2 nuclear reactors and these solar panels. You can get rid of this box if you really want to, and you should be all sweet. As I was editing the video, I noticed the ammoniacal solution I was piping in might be a little bit hard to get out. So I just made a small little edit so that it comes out from after the recyclers. So it's easy for you to pipe in from wherever it comes from. I'll have that updated in the actual blueprint. And that's pretty much it. That's how you get your Aquilo system automatically running. Let's see how this might actually look in the real game now. Here's my system implemented in the real game with bots and droids and everything. So you'll notice a few changes. First of all, with the rocket silo, I've got a bunch of roboports here, and that's to do with the slow charging speed of your robots. If you want to deliver your science via bots into your rocket, then you're going to need a lot of roboports to charge it because they're really slow at picking up science and putting it into the rocket. So make sure wherever you're buffering your science packs, it's close to the rockets and close to a lot of roboports. Now, I've tried to make the inputs of the system easy to work with, but you're going to have to do some creative work in terms of getting the solutions in and stuff. Like, for example, in my blueprint, the lithium brine was coming from this side, but in reality, my lithium brine is up north. So I've had to like pipe it in and do some creative spaghetti to get that actually into the system. You might have to rework some of your heat pipes and stuff in the blueprint to get that to work. And similarly, my fluorine is coming from all the way down south over here, and it's coming along this heating island chain all the way from this side. So I had to do some creative piping to once again get that into the system a different way to in the blueprint. Same happens with crude oil, depending on where your crude oil is. Mine is over here. I needed like 4 pumps to get that all working. So I had to add in all that extra heat piping from wherever the closest heating tower was and pipe that crude oil in from a different direction with some creative spaghetti. One final note is the holmium input. So I've put my cargo landing pad over this side where the holmium is getting input into this system over here. So it's being shipped from Fulgora and being delivered via belt to our lithium maker. So I recommend just putting this cargo bay over here. It works for me. And just finally, once you've got all this set up and you've done your sciences, what are you going to do with all your science? So you can research these things: captive biter spawner, quantum processor, foundation, legendary quality, and rocket part productivity, as well as all your fusion stuff and your railguns, which you're going to need to end the game. So it's a good idea to have a little bit of extra space on the left of the cargo bay, because all of this extra stuff like quantum processors, they need parts from every single planet: tungsten, superconductor, and carbon, and all of that's going to be shipped via some sort of interstellar logistics network to a cargo bay. And you can imagine trying to pull 3 items out of here via a belt, and having that belt properly heated via heat pipes and stuff is going to be a massive pain in the butt. So I've got all my assembling machines and my cryo plants over here, and they're directly pulling out of the cargo bay. The ones that need like multiple imported materials, they're all just being directly pulled out of the cargo bay like this. So there is definitely room in this blueprint on the left over here for more expansion when you do need your quantum processors, your fusion power cells, and your foundation. And additionally, if you need another cryo plant to make some railgun turrets, I've just got another one over here. You can very easily pull the cold fluorokeotine out of the system, and you can pipe any hot fluorokeotine pretty easily back into the system. But that's it, guys. This is the fully implemented system in my actual game, and aside from human error causing this system to shut down a few times, I've actually had no issues with it. And it's been, if you watch my Let's Play, it's been running for like 10 to 20 hours, like non-stop, just producing cryoscience, like way too much cryoscience, more than I'll ever need. So it's definitely perfectly functional and fine. But of course, if you do find any issues with the blueprints, please do let me know in the comment section, and I will amend and fix the blueprints, and the link will be in the description. If you've learned something from this video, don't forget to leave me a like and subscribe. That'll greatly help my channel, and I will see you guys in the next video. If you're looking for something to watch in the meantime, consider checking out my Factorio Space Age Let's Play series.